Okay, 7.1, Europe moves towards war. After Napoleon was defeated, the Congress of Vienna met in 1814. The group wanted to create peace and a balance of power in Europe. The Congress took apart the French Empire and gave monarchs back their thrones. However, a new political ideal was taking shape. Nationalism swept through Europe. Nationalists thought nations should be formed based on people who shared common heritage, language, and customs. Monarchs had gained their land by winning wars, signing treaties, and arranging marriages. As a result, Europe had empires that each included many, nationalities. The Austro-Hungarian Empire, Russian Empire, and Ottoman Empire each included many ethnic groups. For example, in addition to ruling over Russians, the Russian Tsar ruled over Ukrainians, Poles, Jews, and Turks. Each of these groups had its own culture. Nationalists thought each of these ethnic groups deserved its own country. Nationalism tore apart empires, but it built nations. By 1870, Italy was a unified nation. Germany had also achieved national unity in the mid-1800s. People felt patriotic and devoted to their countries. However, nationalism also set the stage for war because it caused competition between nations. European nations competed for materials to use in their factories and for markets to sell their goods. The nations competed with each other for colonies in Africa and Asia. For example, Germany and France nearly went to war twice over who would control Morocco in northern Africa. When most of Europe supported France, Germany backed down. As distrust between countries grew, the European powers built up their militaries. The rivalries led to the creation of military alliances. Countries had alliances that would back each other up if one of their allies was attacked. In the 1880s, Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy formed the Triple Alliance. Britain, France, and Russia joined together under the Triple Entente in the early 1900s. The French word entente means alliance or agreement. The alliances were designed to keep peace. However, a disagreement between two rival powers could now drag the whole continent to war. In 1914, a chain reaction would lead to World War I. It would be the largest war Europe and the world had ever seen. First question, number one, monarchs had gained their land by blank. Okay. So this one was all of the above. Okay. Up here it had told us that they had won their land by winning wars, signing treaties, and arranging marriages. Number two, both blank and Germany became unified nations in the 1880s. This was actually Italy and Germany here. By 1870, Italy was a unified nation, and Germany also achieved national unity. So this is Italy and Germany. It's funny that Italy and Germany became unified nations, that their nationhood was new, and that'll have serious repercussions after the war. Number three, Germany and France nearly went to war over who would control blank. It was Morocco in northern Africa. Number four, blank thought that nations should be formed based on people who shared common heritage, language, and customs. These are nationalists. Nationalists. The Triple Alliance was made up of, okay, so there were two main teams, I'll call them teams, just prior to World War I. The first was the Triple Alliance. These are, from our point of view, as Americans, these would be considered the bad guys. The Triple Alliance was made up of A, Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Italy. Okay. So now we're moving into the crossword. And one across is nationalism caused competition between nations. Okay. Up here we had said that the Triple Alliance was made up of these countries, but the blank was made up of Britain, France, and Russia. This was the Triple Entente. Okay. An easy way to think of this is France is sort of the center of this team, and Entente is a French word. Okay, Entente. It sounds sort of French, I guess. Number 5 across. A disagreement between two countries could now drag the whole continent to, well, of course, this is war. Number 6, nationalists. Nationalists believe that nations should be formed based on blank heritage, language, and customs. This is common. They thought that if people had the same sort of ancestry, they had the same language, and they had the same customs, that they should have their own nation. And blank, blank, blank would be the largest war Europe and the world had ever seen. World War I. Now keep in mind, World War I is the name that we give it, but at the time, this would have been called the Great War. Okay, or just after the war, it was called the Great War. It didn't get called World War I until World War II had begun. As distrust between countries grew, the European powers built up their militaries. Blank thought each ethnic group deserved its own country. This was nationalists. Okay. Now this is an important idea, because if each ethnic group deserves their own country, ethnic group and race, they have a lot of overlap. And so it's as if they believe that each race should live in its own country. And that is an idea that is not always productive, we'll say. European empires, like the Russians and the Ottomans, they had ruled over many different ethnic groups. Ethnic groups are also called ethnicities. Okay. These are different people that, they usually look different, they dress different, they speak different languages, and they worship different things. So these alliances were designed to keep peace, but they resulted in a small war becoming a large war. And these countries that had alliances, they would back each other up if one of their allies was attacked. We can see in the map below, if France and Germany have a problem, well, then France and Italy also have a problem. Okay. And Britain and Germany have a problem. And Russia and Austria-Hungary are going to have a problem. So we can see how having alliances, it took small conflicts and it made them larger. All right, question number 1 down here. It says, which alliance had the most land? We can see that Russia is immense. And so whichever team it's on is going to have the most land, and that is the Triple Entente. The Triple Entente is Britain, France, and Russia. 3 countries that did not belong to either alliance. So we can find that anywhere on the map. We can see Cyprus, the Ottoman Empire, Greece, Bulgaria, Romania, Serbia. I don't really like these as answers because later in the war they would actually take part. But before the war, very importantly, these 3 countries did not choose a side. The first was Spain. Spain did not choose a side prior to World War I. Oh. Belgium also did not choose a side prior to World War I. Okay. And Switzerland. Switzerland never did choose a side. And you might use your imagination as to why Switzerland would not want to do war. Okay. It seems to me that they're right in the middle of it, and that Switzerland knew that any war it took part in, it could not survive. Number 3, if war broke out, why might it be unlikely that fighting would happen in Britain? Well, it's really hard to march troops across the English Channel. Britain is an island, and even though there are such things as troop ships, Britain was never invaded by Germany. No successful invasion ever took place. Matter of fact, I'm not sure, after the Battle of Agincourt, I'm not sure if Britain was ever invaded again. Okay, here we get into the extension activities. There are 3 questions. You only needed to answer one of them. I answered all 3 in case you guys wanted to see how I might answer. Okay. While nationalism led to patriotism, it also increased racism. Why do you think that nationalism affected racism? Well, my answer was that because nationalists think that a country should be based on heritage, and nationalists sort of tie ethnicity to heritage, which makes sense, right? People's ancestors, what they inherit, comes from, a larger ethnic group, perhaps. But people conflate race with ethnicity. They are very closely tied. And because of this, nationalism and racism are in many ways much the same thing. The idea that a nation should be formed based on race is similar to the idea that it should be based on heritage. They're similar. Number 2, unlike North America, Europe has many independent nations on one continent. Do you think being neighbors makes it easier or more difficult for countries to get along? Well, I said that having neighbors who are unlike you makes it more difficult to get along. In the United States, people in different states still identify to belonging to the same nation. But in Europe, people living across most borders aren't of the same nation. They're different. And it makes it more difficult for them to get along. In some cases, even though they live only, 50 miles apart, 2 people might not speak the same language. And when you don't have a common language with people, it can be difficult to get along. Number 3, countries that had alliances with each other would back each other up in times of war. Alliances are like friendships. Can you think of a time that being friends with one person caused you to have a problem with another person? Describe what happened in that situation. It happened a lot in high school. In school, when one guy from my friend group had problems with a person, our whole friend group had a problem with their whole friend group, and that's just the way it worked. Now, we weren't nations or even gangs of people, but we were groups of friends, circles, you might call it. We were circles of friends. And when someone caused problems with one of us, they sort of caused problems with all of us. And then in return, if we had problems with one guy, we usually had problems with his whole friend group. So this is not unlike what happened prior to World War I in Europe. We can see on our map, where's our map? You see on our map that, any beef between any of, these countries and these countries would quickly turn into a large scale war, a war that they came to call the Great War.